With 2025 well underway and a new head chungus at the helm, big changes are afoot. Trump and Melania released meme coins, introducing grandparents to the surging crypto market. Marines are playing spades and spitting dip at the southern border, while big booty Latinas run psyops. China released a knockoff ChatGPT. Apparently, we all have to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America now, a change that is catching on as well as the Freedom Fries rebrand of 2003. Plus, a whole bunch of other things YouTube might get mad if I talk about. But as the US does the most American things it can imagine, the market keeps spinning, and WallStreetBets degenerates keep flexing their trades unabated. Mi gente, it is my honor to present the Dankest trades of the Reconquista. Coming in fast is a weeb by the name of Check Rain, who makes more than $100,000 a year working as a software developer for the military-industrial complex in Singapore, which is sus. Also sus, Check Rain pussed out and deleted all his WallStreetBets posts after I wrote this script, but before I screenshotted most of the images, which is exactly what a communist sympathizer would do. Joining Reddit in October 2019, he spent 3 years posting nothing but anime girls in unhealthy excess. But in the course of international affairs, even Singapore anime fans eventually find themselves drawn to the mothership of WallStreetBets, and Check Rain is no exception. With his low-expense lifestyle and his substantive income over many years, he was able to save up over 600,000 Singapore dollars for investing, or about 450,000 normal dollars. Check Rain Senpai started posting on WallStreetBets in September 2024, describing how he had recently made an unspecified gain on Soxal puts and ASTS calls. But here in September, as investors started getting bearish ahead of the traditional September decline, Check Rain was not convinced that a pullback was ahead. In a contrarian move, the big dog inversed WallStreetBets and YOLO'd his money on Soxal, a 3x leveraged bullish semiconductor ETF. His 40,050 shares translated into a $114,500 bet that chips would defy any September pullback. And for his aggressive audacity, he was rewarded, as Soxal had bottomed just below his buy price and began a savage rally for the next month. The implied gain would be about $48,000. But by October 11th, we learned that there was a serious problem. Our homie reveals that he had lost about 72% of his portfolio on unspecified options during this time frame, leaving him with about 150,000 Singapore dollars left. To his dishonor, Check Rain did not share the cause of this loss, but admits he suffers from an undiagnosed gambling addiction, making it likely that his losses were sustained when he self-cucked on short-term options. The Soxal gain was like putting gauze on a buckshot wound. Although these losses were heavy, our man knew just what to do. He consulted his waifu pillow on what to do next, and she reminded him of how Yusuke Urameshi was savagely beaten by Toguro with seemingly no prospect of survival. Only after being left bloodied and beaten was Yusuke able to fully unleash his fury and obliterate Toguro with a full-power spirit gun, resulting in decisive victory. If Yusuke could overcome the demon Togoro's savage onslaught, so too could Check Rain overcome a bloodied portfolio. On October 14th, the inspired trader got back on his feet. It was time to rebuild and find a new target. At this time, sentiment around Nvidia was growing, and analysts began speculating that it would overcome even Apple's market cap. The writing was on the wall. Traders and analysts were pumping the stock too high, and there was no legitimate reason for its meteoric rise. With $39,000, our man went in on 168 at-the-money puts on Nvidia, expiring at the end of the week. He coupled this with $17,000 on SOX-S, a bearish semiconductor ETF that would follow Nvidia down. He also entered 54 out-of-the-money covered calls on ASTS, banking on a minor price rise. This trio of positions would be his spirit gun, his shot at resurgence. The following morning on October 15th, Nvidia started the day with a nasty but short-lived dip. SOX-S tracked Nvidia down. For a bearish tech trader like Check Rain, this was thick gains. Overnight, the big man added $103,000 to his coffers. But there was more to be done. Believing the time for further pullback was at hand, the big weeb reassessed his positions and topped up with some more cash. Expecting CEO Jensen to slip up, Check Rain went in on 168 contracts of Nvidia puts at the $139 strike, expiring October 18th, which is really similar to the position that he had closed just a few days prior. His prediction was spot on, as Nvidia fell down the elevator shaft pre-market. When the sun rose over the US of A, Rain Man revealed a $10,000 gain on Nvidia puts and a $16,000 gain on ASTS shares, bringing his portfolio to almost $300,000. This was a chance to cash out, but after talking it over with Waifu, the Mad Lad decided to hold onto his Nvidia puts expiring in just 3 days. This was the same logic that cost him so much money earlier in the year, but this time, he was confident that a bet against Nvidia was his biggest brain move yet. As the night dragged on in Singapore, Americans continued to trade their shares. Our man hit the hay, expecting to wake up in the morning to his results. But fate intervened. Big Homie woke up in a cold sweat, with an otherworldly force telling him to check his stock. His eyes began to shed tears of joy, for while he slept, Nvidia shit the bed, and his position was now cruising in at a $100,000 gain. Closing out, he slept the rest of the night peacefully after some quality time with Waifu the Pillow, because with this gain, he had become like his favorite anime heroes. Tactical, cold-blooded, and always one step ahead. Following consultation with a Naruto poster, he determined to curb his gambling addiction by withdrawing almost all of his money, leaving $50,000 in his account, 50% of which would be held in ASTS, and the other 50% postured for his ultimate, final move. On October 29th, the stage was set. Putting aside the noise, Rain Man reflected on the US election. Cheeto Bandito's stock DJT had run up quite high as betting markets predicted a Trump win. It decisively crossed the $40 mark on October 28th, closing at about $47 that day. The next day, the stock surged again, reaching almost $55. Trump's win was basically a done deal if betting markets were to be believed, but Check Rain was not convinced. Even if Mango did win, that would mean very little for DJT stock, which had negligible assets, and its entire price was basically a measurement of MAGA fervor. This was a sell the news event, or in other words, a buy puts event. With his $25,000 of remaining liquidity, the hotshot grabbed deep out of the money puts on DJT, expiring in 2 days, with the bulk of his position in puts at the $40 strike, more than $15 out of the money. Ever bearish on Nvidia, he also grabbed $20,000 of puts there as well. This exceeded his cash balance, indicating he was leveraged to the balls. The next 48 hours would determine everything. But it took nowhere near that long. On Halloween, news broke out that underdog Kamala Harris gained ground in the polls. Suddenly, a red team win did not look like a sure thing. DJT stock tanked to $35 over the course of the afternoon, and our homie was swimming in green. That very same day, Reuters broke the news that Nvidia was hitting antitrust roadblocks in the EU, which turned weak-handed shareholders into jelly. Our man's disdain for the chip company bore fruit as the stock fell more than 5% in moments. In the course of an afternoon, the stars had aligned. Both positions were now deep in the money, and his profits reached $200,000. Waifu was right. Through sheer determination and some serious luck, our man had overcome the odds to walk off into the sunset with a huge, rapid gain. His Togoro, his menace, was decisively defeated. With his portfolio fattened and his schedule cleared, Check Rain turned his time and energy to something far more meaningful, using bots to crush noobs on chess.com. Armed with his programming skills and an unhealthy obsession, he's exploiting their API to rack up a ridiculous 65,000 puzzle rating, which means he wins 99% of the time. Just be careful, Check Rain. Chess dudes will shank you if they figure it out. I know touching grass in Singapore might be difficult, but I want you to try. Now, let's hear from my sponsor so I can get paid. I personally find it a bit frustrating to maintain crypto in a cold storage wallet like Ledger or Trezor. They're kind of a pain to set up, you have to plug them in at least a few times a year or they die, and there's a bit of a learning curve to using the interface. On the other hand, you don't want to leave your crypto in an exchange or on a hot wallet where you're vulnerable to phishing. To fix this gap, I recently got into Tangem, which is a cold storage device that uses near-field communication to access your wallet. Instead of having to plug your $150 Ledger into your desktop and wait for a very slow interface, you can just put your cell phone near a Tangem card or ring and you can access your wallet via the app. Make no mistake, people tend to think that your crypto is somehow held inside a cold storage device. That's not true. Your coins are on the blockchain. These devices are just the way you take your coins out of your wallet. Although Tangem gives you the option to go seedless, I personally prefer the familiarity of having a backup seed phrase. If you use the seed phrase option like me, make sure you're storing it correctly. I find Tangem a lot easier to use than my Ledger. In fact, I really prefer Tangem over the more traditional hardware wallets. Tangem supports way more cryptocurrencies, it's easier to access your holdings, and the cards cost about half as much as a Ledger or Trezor. The Ring, more expensive, is about the same price as a hardware wallet, but with my discount code, we can knock down another 10%, making the cheapest set less than $50, plus about $7 shipping to the US. Thanks to Tangem for sponsoring, and now let's get back to the action with Dank Trade number 2. Coming in next is a WallStreetBets veteran who lost his Reddit account and had to create a new one in August 4th, 2024 by the moniker of One Assignment 5126. Our man is an entrepreneur in the outdoor cushions and umbrella industry by day, but moonlights as a competitive black ops gamer and outer space enthusiast. The big dog got into options trading during the lockdowns of 2020, like many other bright-eyed common folk. And like many such novices, the siren song of WallStreetBets was as irresistible as yum-yum sauce to a hungry Caucasian. His first foray into our favorite sub included deep-throating extensive bearish DD posts that explained how the summer of 2020 would be terrible for the US economy, thus tanking the market. The umbrella salesman was convinced by this persuasive argumentation and dropped an unspecified fat stack on SPY puts, which in the summer of 2020 was one of the worst things you could do. His puts got strangled like Vercingetorix, and were likewise ultimately wrecked and widely regarded as a tremendous failure. This initial defeat was painful, but One Assignment stayed positive by viewing this as tuition money in the College of Options. He resolved to be more deliberate in his future trades, and he spent the next 2 years rebuilding his pot. In 2022, it was time to get back in the game. With a renewed sense of self, he decided to invest only in companies that he understood at a deeper level, giving him an edge over the barbaric retail traders who are blinded by the dichotomy of panic and FOMO. Being a UFO enthusiast, he decided to explore the space industry for an unpolished gem. But the space exploration niche is notorious for hosting dogshit companies designed to fleece investors, like Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic, ticker SPACE. But after concentrated effort, he dug up Rocket Labs, ticker RKLB, and was pleased with their vertical integration game plan. The company's 5D chess move was to acquire satellite component companies so as to keep production in-house and shield themselves from industry tomfoolery, and to leverage upcoming Department of Defense contracts to maximize revenue. For an industry in which the average company's entire game plan is to offer 45-minute outer space tours to rich people, Rocket Labs having an actual path to profitability was like a breath of ozone. Anticipating that these game-changing catalysts would unfold in 2023 and 24, our mad lad started accumulating shares while the stock was around $4 levels. He also picked up long-term out-of-the-money calls at the $5 and $6 strikes expiring in October 2024. All he had to do was stay patient. But as months turned into years, his leaps slowly decayed as Rocket Labs stubbornly resisted getting above $4 and change. By summer 2024, his shares were still essentially flat, and his calls were being chewed to bits with expiration just a few months out. But having spent a significant amount of time on the Rocket Lab and Rocket Lab Investors Club subreddits, our man continued to profess his thesis that government contracts for space projects, particularly for the Space Force, were just around the corner. All it would take is one good contract to send the stock to Alpha Centauri. Putting his money where his mouth is, the big dog reloaded his positions with calls at the $5.50 strikes all the way up to $10 strikes, expiring in 2025 and 26. As he continued building out his position, he eventually grew to invest about $70,000 in calls over 24 months. It's unclear how red he was at any given time, but as his 2024 calls slowly bled out, there was no doubt this aggressive investment was not comfortable. Only Rocket Man's unbridled belief in the company secured his iron hands. But was he smart money, or another sucker buying into the corrupt space industry? On August 16, 2024, Chad CEO Sir Peter Beck answered that question for us. Sir Petey announced that Rocket Labs shipped 2 Mars-bound aircraft to Cape Canaveral for the Escapade heliophysics mission to search for plasma in Mars's atmosphere, a groundbreaking mission by any standard. This yeeted the stock by almost 20% to above $6. His October calls, which were being ground to dust for 2 years, were now in the money just 60 days before expiration. By the following day, Homeboy's calls cruised in for a gain of over $90,000. Sir Pete had blessed his shareholders with chonked out bags of cash. But as our astronaut saw it, this was only step 1 of a much larger mission. He sold only his $10 strikes expiring in January and reinvested the gain into 8,000 shares. He now held 22,000 shares with an average price of $6 per share, signifying a stock position of about 130,000. 4 days later, He offered even more cash to the rocket surgeons by adding 100 $10 strike calls expiring at the end of 2026. For better or worse, Mr. Jetson was now in for the long haul. After a few months of speculation driving the stock to above $14 on November 12th, our man was swimming in gains and flexing a new spacesuit at the club. But his desires were not yet satiated. He needed more. And more came that very afternoon. November 12th, CEO PD Big Mac hit the scene once again and dropped news of a sweet deal with a confidential commercial satellite operator to work with Rocket Labs' reusable Neutron rockets in 2025. Further, the company announced $105 million in third quarter revenue, representing a 55% year-over-year increase. A backlog of over $1 billion in orders predicted a future that would shine brighter than Polaris. The next day, our cosmonaut gawked at his portfolio as the stock reached an all-time high, surging 30% to over $18. Our man's calls were now deep in the money, with nothing but open heliosphere ahead. One assignment 5126 made more than $600,000 on just his calls alone, and his 22,000 shares were now worth more than $400K. From 100,000 in August to over $1 million by November, our man had achieved the almost impossible milestone, and his fellow degens weighed in with a mix of envy and praise. As the newly minted millionaire flies off into the rings of Uranus, we bid him the best in his new lifestyle. Don't spend it all in one place, big dog. And now, the moment we've waited for, the dankest trade of the Reconquista. Let us feast our eyes on a story of a man who lives his life freely and shamelessly, enjoying a taste of all that life has to offer. It is my pleasure to introduce Sascourge, who joined Reddit way back in June 2016. At the time, he revealed that he was in the middle of his bulking phase and sought to increase his strength and flexibility through deep form squats. But in short order, he'd come off of his normie subreddits to explore crypto in the 2017 boom, in which he purchased Ripple, a cryptocurrency used to enable low-cost internet money transfers. He purchased at a high price, closed at a low, and then FOMO'd in again at an even higher price, making him a great candidate for WallStreetBets right out of the gate. A generally shoot-from-the-hip type of individual, Sascourge also managed to physically melt a Ledger Nano S, got a tattoo of a crypto scam company called Titanium Blockchain Infrastructure Services weeks before it went under, and ate Chick-fil-A after getting gastrointestinal surgery. As the 2017-18 crypto hype died off, Sascourge fell back into financial obscurity, like Verge or Dentacoin. But the rush he felt trading his digital money never fully abated. For several years, our man regressed into normie posting, spending a lot of time discussing football, cars, and health. But every once in a while, he popped into WallStreetBets with the cool kids, leaving the door open for his next stage of degeneracy. Fast forward to February 2024, our homie started commenting on the Palantir subreddit. He expressed his discontent with the company for allowing insiders to sell immediately after positive earnings, along with a 5% shareholder dilution. User Real by Call counterdunked by rationalizing the incentive to insiders and pushed Sascourge to hold the line. Big Daddy Scourge appears unpersuaded by Call's encouragement, enough to drop shares like a hot potato. Research would show that our man's concern about insider selling was indeed unwarranted, as this was just a pre-planned stock sell event, but he did no such DD himself. Even after selling, Big Homie's contempt was not entirely assuaged. Despite Baikal's explanation, Sascourge was frustrated that as shares were diluted 5%, he had effectively been buying 95% of a share at 100% of the price. This sensation of treachery continued to fester, and he kept this betrayal in his pocket, as one does Chekhov's gun. During the summer of 2024, he set his sights on a fitness and beverage company called Celsius Holdings. High school students were guzzling cans of Celsius like crack addicts in Red Hook. Lunch money was being diverted into energy drinks at an unprecedented rate. But since our man did not have the money to buy calls on it, he came up with another plan. Still salty about being shortchanged by Palantir's share dilution, he decided to be a scourge to this deceptive, self-diluting company. Believing Palantir would continue its unabated betrayal of shareholders, he determined that the stock would continuously meet resistance with every price increase. Betting against an upward move by selling calls would yield him premium that he could use to buy Celsius calls. To materialize this plan, he sold Palantir calls at the highest strike price being offered at the time, expiring in January 2026. He sold 32 naked calls at the $40 strike, yielding him $8,520 in premium. At the time, Palantir was trading for about $25 and appeared to have no interest in getting anywhere near $40. All he needed to do was wait for Palantir to flop around aimlessly as time went on, dropping the value of his naked short calls and awarding him with a gain to buy calls of the energy drink stock. This move would slam dunk 2 birds with 1 stone. For those still learning about options, selling naked calls means you are now obligated to sell shares of stock at the strike price whenever the call buyer decides to execute the contract. If you do not have shares to sell to the buyer, you need to go out into the open market and buy those shares so that you can give them to the call buyer. For agreeing to this obligation, Saskurge got paid an average of just over $266 in premium per contract. Times 32 contracts, that's $8,520 collected. That's a good chunk for Celsius calls. Some traders will buy shares of the underlying stock to hedge against the stock flying higher, putting the call seller in a jam. But to Saskurge, trading covered calls did nothing but represent a lack of conviction in your trade. Our man carried on, his short calls butt naked, with a big bag of premium slated for energy drink calls. As election season ramped up with Cheeto Bandito in the lead, investors smelled money to be made. They expected a flood of federal funding on national security and counter-immigration measures, which would send demand for Palantir's software tools into overdrive. Investors started huffing Palantir freebase, driving shares through a steady upward swing. The naked Saskurge began to sweat, but he remained steadfast. Surely, Palantir would dilute shares once again, or profit takers would cash out. For now, he was safe. But the red team clinched victory in November, and in Mango's America, not even Mars is safe.
To plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars.
With inauguration imminent, Palantir's Apollo mission continued, and the stock blasted past $40 like bullets through paper and kept zipping on above the $60 mark. Our big homie barely had time to react. Palantir had doubled to well above the highest available strike when he sold his calls. And all this time, the Palantir board was nowhere to be seen. They did not dilute. Insiders did not dump shares. They almost appeared to want the share price to keep climbing. Indeed, Palantir was doing everything they could to strengthen their business, including securing exclusive government contracts as a powerhouse of AI-enabled military intelligence. If Papa Scourge hadn't panicked over the 5% share dilution and instead diamond-handed the stock, he'd be sitting on more than 100% in gains. Instead, his position was smoked sausage. On December 5th, 2024, our man revealed the profit and loss of his seminal trade. As the stock yeeted up, $40 strike calls went from trading for $266 to over $3,500 a piece. Short 32 naked calls, covering at $3,500 each, would mean a total loss of more than $100,000, more than his entire portfolio value. He was entirely out of liquidity, with no means of untangling this mess. Now, he is facing the grim reality of needing to deliver 3,200 shares that he can't afford to buy. Rolling the position up or out wasn't a realistic option, as his delta was already over 90 and continuing to get worse. As of late January, Palantir is trading for over $75. With contracts trading for about $3,900, Saskurge is about $120,000 in the red. Our man is stuck between ice and the rock. If he closes, he will owe his broker $120,000. If he holds, his only hope is that the stock drops down like Monica Lewinsky on Bill Clinton. What was a king to do? At present, it appears Saskurge is now in a race against margin call. Brokers will only let you cuck yourself so hard before they demand you pony up. And if Palantir ticks any higher, the big dog might need to pull some shifts behind Wendy's to make ends meet after that margin call hits, which is looking pretty likely. But there is hope yet. Jim Cramer tweeted that he was working on a quote, Sunday brainstorm about buying shares of Palantir. If Cramer is long, then Palantir might tank after all. Big Daddy Saskurge, your willingness to stand naked in your defiance against Palantir is worthy of the utmost respect. While the company bathes in newfound funding, you stand proud, exposed, and in contempt. It is my honor to award you the crown of regards. May you wear it as proudly as you wear your losses.
Who wants to be king?
Thanks for watching. I invite you to join our free Discord, and I hope to see you guys next time.